Okay, this unit's going to be covering Unit 8, which is over factoring. So the main thing that we need to remember here when we're factoring is to look for what my a value is. So if you remember, the generic form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now, a few things to note. It has to be equal to 0. If my a value is 1, then we can just use our shortcut. If a does not equal 1, we're going to have to factor by grouping. And one more thing, if there's only 2 terms, you're just going to take out the GCF. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at these examples. The first one, I've got x squared plus 15x plus 56. My a value here is in fact 1. So I can go ahead and create my product sum puzzle where a times c is on top and b is on bottom. So on top, I'm going to have 1 times 56, which is 56. On bottom, I'm going to have positive 15. Now I have to think what multiplies to give me 56, adds to give me 15. Should be thinking 8 and 7. And then I can go ahead and create my factors, where my first term is x, and my second term is going to come from this 8 and this 7, where it's a positive 8 and a positive 7. Now, if you wanted to double check yourself, you could FOIL this back out, and you should end up with the same answer that you started with right here. Okay, but this is your final answer. When a is 1, this is how you factor. Number 13, I do not have 3 terms, I only have 2 terms. So I just need to look and see what is the biggest or the greatest common factor that I can take out of 20x to the third and 10x to the second. Well, I can take out a 10 for sure. And then how many x's can I take out from both? I'm always going to look at the lowest exponent. So I can take for sure 2 out. So take out x to the second. So when I factor out x to the second, I'm going to have 10x to the second times, well, what is 20x to the third divided by 10x to the second? We'll get 2x to the first, or just 2x. And then if I take 10x squared divided by 10x squared, that's just the same thing, so I'm going to have plus 1. And this is your final answer. This is your final factored form of that original equation above. All right, not too bad so far. This next one, I have 4 terms now. When I have 4 terms, I have to use factor by grouping. So what that means is I'm going to split this in half, and I'm going to look at the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, what can I take out of 8x to the third and 4x to the second? We can take out a 4x squared. And when I take out a 4x squared, I'm left over with 8x to the third divided by 4x squared, which is just 2x to the first, or 2x. And then also 4x to the second divided by 4x to the second. That's going to give me a positive 1. Okay, now I can go look at the second set of terms. I've got a positive 10x, a positive 5. I can only take out a positive 5 from both of those. And when I take that out, 10x divided by 5 will give me not just 2, but 2x. And then 5 divided by 5 gives me plus 1. Okay, so now we see that we've got a common factor here, 2x plus 1, 2x plus 1. We're going to pull that out. That is one of my factors. And then I'm also going to go ahead and pull out my leftovers on the outside, 4x squared plus 5. And that's going to create my second set of factors. So this right here, if you would FOIL it back out, you would end up with where we started. All right. I've got 3 terms. My first term is not a equals 1. But could I divide all of these numbers by 3? Maybe. that I could. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make it easier for ourselves. So I'm going to divide all these numbers, all these terms by 3. When I do that, I get y squared minus 12y plus 35. So now this inside trinomial has an a value of 1, which means I can create a cross product sum and use my shortcut. So a times c goes on top, so 35 would be on top. My b value would be negative 12. So I need to think what multiplies to give me 35, adds to give me a negative 12. That's going to be a negative 5 and a negative 7. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those. I still have that 3 on the outside. My variable this time is y. And then my other terms I get from looking in my cross product sum table, negative 5, negative 7. And that would be your final answer. What is the quadratic formula on your final? You'll just have to be able to identify it by multiple choice, but hopefully that song is stuck in your head. Pop goes the weasel. This is your quadratic formula. And the discriminant is just part of the quadratic formula. The discriminant is just that stuff underneath the square root, so b squared minus 4ac. All right, flipping it to the second page. All right, we've got 4 more here. This time we're going to solve each equation by any method and actually get an answer for what our variable equals. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at 17. I've got a trinomial on the left, it's a quadratic, and my a value is 1. So that means I can create a cross product sum where a times c goes on top, which is 63, and my b value goes on bottom, which is 16. So I need to think of what multiplied together gives me 63, but then adds together to give me 16. We should be thinking 9 and 7. So those are going to replace or go in for the factors. So I've got a plus 9 and I've got a plus 7. Now that I have these two factors that are equal to 0, I can create 2 equations. One of them as a plus 9 equals 0, and the other one as a plus 7 equals 0. This is because the zero product property tells me that if 2 things multiplied together give me 0, that means at least one of those things has to be 0. So we're going to solve both of these equations for a, and I'm going to get that a equals negative 9 and a equals negative 7. And these would be your final answers for this answer. Moving into 18. 18, I only have 2 terms, which means I'm looking for GCF. What can I take out of both of these terms? Well, it looks like I can only take out a 4. So when I divide by 4, I end up with 4 times a squared minus 16. Okay, and this is actually one of our differences of sums. And if you don't remember this shortcut, you could still do it the long way with just replacing the middle term with a 0x or a 0a. And you can create the cross product sum that way. But if you remember the shortcut, we're really just looking at what's the square root of a squared. That would be a. And then what's the square root of 16? A positive 4 and a negative 4. If I FOIL this back out, you should end up getting these a values in the middle to cancel out. A positive 4a, a negative 4a, those cancel out. So this is difference of squares. If you're struggling on that, just look up a video of difference of squares and you should be fine. This equals 0. So I still have to finish solving it. These things equal 0. I don't need to worry about the 4 on the outside. So I've got x plus 4 equals 0, which means that, a plus 4 equals 0, which means a equals negative 4, or a minus 4 equals 0, which means that a equals positive 4. So these would be your answers for your quadratic formula, or your quadratic equation. All right, 19 is not equal to 0, which means I need to get it equal to 0 before I do anything else, so I'm going to add 24 to both sides. So I've got a squared minus 11a plus 24 equals 0. Since my a value is 1, I can create a product sum where a times c goes on top and b goes on bottom. So what multiplies to give me 24 adds to give me negative 11. That'd be negative 8 and negative 3. So my two factors that are going to go in there with those a's are negative 8 and negative 3. Now I can create my two separate equations to solve for a minus 8 equals 0. Add 8 to both sides, which means that a equals 8, and a minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides, which means that a equals 3. This would be your final answer for your quadratic. And lastly, I again don't have it equal to 0, so I'm going to have to add 3 to both sides. So I've got 2a squared plus 7a plus 3 equals 0. So a little bit of bad news here. My a value is not 1, and I can't divide all three terms by 2, so that means that we're going to have to factor it by grouping. But in order to get those two middle terms to replace that 7a, we need to create our product sum chart. Oops. So a times c goes on top, 6 on top, 7 on bottom. The only thing that multiplies to give me 6 and adds to give me 7 is 6 and 1. So we're going to go ahead and rewrite this 7a with a 6a and a 1a. It doesn't matter which order you put it in. So I've got 2a squared plus 6a plus 1a plus 3 equals 0. All I did was replace that middle term with 6a plus 1a. Okay, now I can split this in half, look at both sides. The GCF of the left side is going to be 2a. So when I take out 2a, I get a plus 3. And on the right side, when I take out just a 1, that's my greatest common factor, I've got plus 1 times also a plus 3. This is all equal to 0 still. So I can take the common factor, which is a plus 3, out from both of those terms. And then my leftovers on the outside, 2a plus 1, create the other factor. Again, these both equal 0. So we're not done yet because we're actually solving this equation. We're not just factoring it. So now I have to set each of these things equal to 0. I've got 2a plus 1 equals 0, and I have a plus 3 equals 0. Now the one on the left here is pretty easy. Subtract 3 from both sides. We get a to be negative 3. On the right, I'm going to have to subtract 1 first. I'll get 2a equals negative 1, which means I divide by 2 on both sides and get that a equals negative 1/2, or is negative 0.5. So your two answers are a equals negative 3 and a equals negative 1/2. And I believe that is it for Unit 8. So that's probably one of the harder units on here, so please, please, please take time to review it. And if you have questions or want some extra practice, come in and see me and I will help you out a little bit.